that the response from the radio station there paid the $15,000 a month like it normally happens on most of the radio stations. But unfortunately, it's hard to get Sodom and Gomorrahites to support Christian causes. And instead of bringing in $15,000 a month, more like about $1,500 a month were coming in. So we wound up having to cancel the station. We were on there about 6 months. We were $40,000 in the hole from the response would come in, everything. I figured it all up. And would you believe, about 2 weeks before we went off the radio station, a lady called up. She says, I'm impressed the Lord to make a $40,000 donation. Almost, if we figured it out exactly, I never figured it out exactly, but probably if we did, probably to the letter, God paid for us to take the warning message to New York City. Now, the other night I was on my knees, and I'm now currently asking to be on radio in Sodom and Gomorrah, in San Francisco, and also Denver. Simply because we know that there's an earthquake coming to San Francisco, and I walked around San Francisco, and I prayed, and I said, Lord, wherever my feet touch, I ask you to give me that city. And so we're praying that we'll be able to get on radio in San Francisco. But my point is, I just began to worship the Lord, make up my own melodies, borrow somebody else's melodies, but most important, just whatever was coming out of my heart. I just began to worship the Lord, singing to Him. So let me summarize. The first thing I think that a person needs to do is make a commitment. Or even, if you're strong enough, make a vow. Now, commitments are a little bit easier broken, but you better not break a vow. Make a vow to the Lord to build your prayer closet. And by the way, you don't build it for a few months. It takes a minimum of 6 months to build it, in my opinion, because there's a lot to learn when you get in there. And yes, don't get me wrong, there's been some times when the prayer closet was maybe only 5 minutes that night. But there's been other times when it's a lot longer, maybe like an hour or so. I've never prayed all night long, but maybe one of these days that'll happen too. I've never forgotten to pray. Well, let me rephrase it. I forget all the time, but the Lord reminds me. Every night. I don't care whether I get in at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, every night. There's been times when my head hit the pillow, and man, it was sinking about 3 feet deep in that pillow, and I was almost asleep, and all of a sudden, the Lord wakes me up. It's time. All right, well, I go in there and pray. And there's been times when the only way I can keep myself awake is to keep my hands in the air while I'm praying. But that's fine. I keep my hands in the air. But I would recommend, first of all, you make a commitment. I think you should get alone where people are not going to interrupt you. I think it has to be a place that you can get on your face, on your hands. You praise with words. You worship with words. Become more Christ-like. Then I recommend you eventually get to the point to where you're singing worship and praise to Him. I also recommend you do not ever go into the prayer closet to get anything. Never, ever, ever walk in there thinking, all right, boy, I got something. I got a bill we got to fix tonight. No. I always walk. And let me just say, there's something that at least happened to me, and I believe it'll happen to you too. Something in my heart, it's like, there's a love. I've got to go and spend some time with my Lord. You miss it. It's like you miss that closeness, that relationship. And I will even say this. I think that I've learned a lot more about love and what love is. I'm not a real loving person, in my opinion, at least compared to a whole lot of people. I look at Hayseed Stevens, and Hayseed Stevens walked into a room, and man, just exuded love, you know. And there's another fella here in Topeka. He's a newscaster, Ralph Hipp. I'll say him by name. He just is a really loving person. And I'm saying, he's a newscaster, and he has more love in his heart than a minister does. And so that's like my big thing that I'm working on, is to be able to walk in that love all the time. But it's all possible through the prayer closet. Never go in to get from God, always go in to give. I also think it's important for you to receive the correction of the Lord, because thy rod and thy staff comfort me. In other words, you allow Him to chasten you. You understand that the chastening of the Lord is good. Those I love I chasten. And you allow Him to correct you. And He will bring things to your mind that you said or you did or you didn't do. Or if you're any place you're not Christ-like, you start building a prayer closet and it will become painfully obvious what you need to work on. I said that right. Painfully obvious. And it's almost like I'll do something during the day and Leslie will say, you know, he's going to get you tonight in the prayer closet. Oh, man. Don't say that. I know it. Don't beat me up anymore. But let me also say, our God is a good God. He is a God of love, and He knows how to deal with you. He knows when it's time to lay the leather on, and He knows when it's time to pour the love in. And He won't whoop on you too hard. Sometimes it seems like it, but He's a good God. Let me give you an example of how God protects. I guess it's probably 6-9 months ago. Matter of fact, we were getting ready for a prophecy club meeting right here at this same location, and my daughter came in and she said, Dad, I almost had an accident. I said, what happened? She said, well, I think I was supernaturally protected. She said, something supernatural happened, let me tell you. She said, okay. She said, you know, I had pulled up to the stoplight, or to the traffic light, the red light, and then there was someone to my right, and then there was someone in the left-hand lane over here. And I looked up in the rearview mirror, and there's a dump truck heading right at me. It's like he's not looking at me. He's not even putting on the brake, and I'm about to get rear-ended bad. And she said, I looked up this way to see if I could maybe run the red light and get out of his way. And she said, but there was an 18-wheeler coming down like this, and what was about to happen, he was about to knock me forward into the oncoming path of the 18-wheeler, and she says, I was about to die. She says, all of a sudden, boom, I'm a block down the road. She said, I promise. I never put my car in gear. I never took my foot off the brake, but I'm a block down the road. I was sitting on the side of the road all of a sudden. God supernaturally moved her out of the way. And I can tell you about a similar story with Leslie. She was coming to the office one day. She turned a corner. Her car was going around and around like this because it was about an inch of new fallen snow. She saw that there was a car coming head on. They were about to crash. They both just started hollering, my wife and Leslie and my daughter, started hollering, blood of Jesus, blood of Jesus. They spun out, stopped over in the snow, and they turned around, and the car that was about to hit them was gone. They got to the office. She walked into the office, and one of the other ladies walked out of the office, and she looked down, and she says, there in Leslie's footprints, you know, with the high heels, was another footprint like about 8 inches, well, was about 12 inches long like that. And she says, well, what is Leslie doing out here barefoot? And she looked down, she thought, that's too big for Leslie's foot. But it was the only footprints in the new fallen 1 inch of snow. You can clearly see it. And then she looked, and then you could see the little high heel marks inside the footprint. And she said, Leslie's angel is barefoot. In other words, Leslie had an angel with her. Great big footprint. There it was in the snow. Wish we'd taken a picture of it now. But I just want to let you know that God is capable of protecting. Matter of fact, I want to say something else about that. Keep in mind, our God is the God that fed 3 million people, their wives, their children, and all of their animals out of thin air for 40 years. Our God caused manna to fall out of the sky to feed people. Our God is the one that fed 3 million people and their wives and their animals, not only fed them, but also watered them out in the wilderness for 40 years. See, I've seen what they believe is the rock that Moses struck. And it's about 25 foot tall, about square, like a dice, except for down the middle of it, there's a crack. But up at the top of it, there's a big round hole, you might say, between the cracks, about the size of a beach ball. And the water didn't come up from the ground to water 3 million people. It was formed out of thin air between a crack and the rock. I'm just saying, brothers and sisters, God protecting us is not a problem. It's not a problem. Let me give you another example. Kimberly Jelt is a pastor in Portland, Oregon I had dinner with one night. She sees visions of the end time. She says this was during the time of the mark of the beast, and she said that every evening they would clasp their hands and they would bow their head in front of an empty plate.